Hi guys, welcome back to When Life Gives You Lemons. I'm Ellen. So today's question is, who is your favorite TV character? If you had to choose between two, would you choose Steve Urkel or would you choose Kimmy Gibbler? And if you don't know who they are, you need to ask your parents or your older siblings or somebody because they're hilarious. Urkel is from Family Matters and Kimmy Gibbler is from Full House, or if you watched on Netflix, Fuller House. In case you didn't know, it kind of breaks my heart a little bit if you didn't already know that. But I think if I had to pick one, Mr. Did I Do That? He's pretty funny. I do like Urkel, but I think my favorite is Gibbler. You'd have to go with Miss Kimmy Gibbler. All right, so moving on, we are going to do some arm stretches. I'm gonna share my screen. And this is gonna come from the Derby website. So here it is. So we're gonna do 20 shoulder taps. So you start like this and you go straight up. All right, so now we're gonna leave our arms like this, and then we're gonna go straight out. So these are gonna be side shoulder taps. All right, so now we're going to do arm extensions. So with your arms out, you're gonna go like this 20 times. And 20. So then with our arms out, you're gonna bring your palms up and you're gonna do bicep extensions. So you're gonna tap your shoulders. All right, so I don't know about you, but like I'm definitely feeling that in my arms. This is another thing that we do through my office since we're all working virtually. We get on twice a day if we're able to, if our schedule allows. And we do these movement breaks. So we just go through the different workout programs that they offer. We don't really do the ones that get on the floor because we are in the middle of the workday and we have things to do, but those are things that we could do on our own. I know a couple of my coworkers are doing another workout program together through Derby, so it's pretty cool. But if you do those arm stretches, you do like 3 sets of them, you really start to feel it. They tire your arms out. And the other workouts that they have, they get your heart rate up, which is good. So now we're done with that. I'm gonna switch it over to Kat. You don't have to listen to me talk the whole time today, so that's pretty cool. I've got Kat, who is my coworker. She's one of the educators at the Health Initiative, and she's going to talk to you about media literacy.
Hi guys, I'm Kat. I'm one of the Teens Health Educators with the Health Initiative, and today we're going to talk a little bit about media literacy. Right, so what exactly is media literacy? I don't know if this is a term that you guys have heard before, but we're going to break it down word by word. so we can get a better understanding of what it means and how then we can apply it. Right? So media. This is any sort of electronic, digital, print, or artistic visuals that are used to transmit messages and communicate from one person to another. So things like news articles, books, magazines, movies, TV shows, video games, social media platforms, art, all of these things are forms of media. Then there's literacy. This is a competence or a knowledge in a specific area. So when we put the two together, we get media literacy, or having the ability and confidence to analyze, evaluate, and create all these different forms of media and communication. All forms of media share one thing in common, and that is that someone created it, and they created it for a specific reason. If we can understand what that reason is, that's the whole entire idea behind media literacy. Why is this important? Right? Why are we taking time out today to talk about this? So becoming more media literate will help you do a couple things. First, it'll help you learn to think more critically, especially about the world around you. It'll also help you become a smarter consumer. This is not just consumer of like physical products, although that certainly is a part of it, but also a consumer of information and news and technology, all of the things that are being thrown at you. Right? Media literacy will also help you ask the right questions, especially when it comes to determining whether or not something is accurate or truthful. And finally, media literacy will help you create media responsibly. So I'm thinking specifically on our forms of social media that we're on all day, sharing and liking and communicating through those platforms in a responsible manner. In a nutshell, media literacy puts you in the driver's seat. It allows you as an individual to control the interpretation of what you see and hear and read, rather than letting whoever created that control you. Right? So it's putting the power back in your hands. We hear this term thrown around a lot, fake news, right? And it's very closely related to media literacy. So I want to take a second to talk about exactly what we mean by fake news, what it is and what it's not. Fake news really is a term that we're using for false information. Right? This false information or misinformation could be in the form of numerous things. So it could be misinformation for profit, right? Someone trying to sell you something, making false claims to get you to buy their product, or clickbait articles. Those sort of types of media get more and more revenue the more clicks that they get, so they use a variety of tactics to make a headline or a picture really sensational to get you to click on it, when really it's not factual or true information at all. This false information could also be for political gain, some sort of propaganda about a cause in order for someone to get elected or re-elected, or to push forward a cause without maybe giving the whole truth about that cause. It also could be misinformation for crime. So thinking about different forms of media that might try and get your identity. So like identity theft, sort of scam emails fall into this category. You'll see it on Facebook often, but like advertisements for like buy one thing, get 10 things free. All you have to do is put in your credit card information, just pay shipping. All of these would be examples of that misinformation for crime. Basically, with this false information, it's anything that's presented to you as a fact that is meant to either mislead, deceive or distract you from the actual truth. Fake news is also uncritically reporting either a hoax or a viral prank or satire as fact. I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with this term, but satire is essentially the use of like humor and irony or exaggeration in order to like mock or make fun of something. So a lot of times these satirical articles look really legitimate, but they're meant to mock news in that way. So it wouldn't make sense if it didn't look like a real news source. So that is one way that this can be a little tricky. Fake news is not honest reporting mistakes, right? So media producers, be they journalists or reporters or artists or even us as social media users, they're people, right? And people make mistakes. We're not perfect, okay? That doesn't excuse sloppy or lazy journalism, right? Mistakes happen, but they can't happen all the time, and they can't be used as an excuse for not doing your sort of due diligence in reporting the facts. Fake news is not the satirical stories or articles or sources in and of themselves, right? Satire is a perfectly legitimate form of writing, form of communication, form of media. The problem is when people report or share those satirical stories as if they were fact. That's where the fake news comes in. And then finally, most importantly, fake news is absolutely not factual information that you just don't like or you don't agree with, be it a cause or a political party or an issue that just isn't your favorite. You can't just claim that it's fake news just because you don't like it. So let us take a couple of minutes. We're going to watch this video that'll talk a little bit more about fake news and then give us some strategies to spot it.
Fake news is nothing new, but bogus stories can reach more people more quickly via social media than what good old-fashioned viral emails could accomplish in years past. A lot of these viral claims aren't news at all, but fiction, satire, and efforts to fool readers into thinking they're for real. Here are some strategies to shield yourself from fake news. Are you familiar with the source? Is it legitimate? Has it been reliable in the past? If not, you may not want to trust it. If a provocative headline drew your attention, read a little further before you decide to pass along the shocking information. Even in legitimate news stories, the headline doesn't always tell the whole story. But fake news, particularly efforts to be satirical, can include several revealing signs in the text. One fake story even attributed a quote to a dolphin. If that had been real, you could argue they buried the lead. Another telltale sign of a fake story is often the byline, if there even is one. And in some cases, the authors are not even real. One story was credited to a doctor who won 14 Peabody Awards and a handful of Pulitzer Prizes, which would be very impressive if it wasn't also totally made up. Many times these bogus stories will cite official or official-sounding sources, but once you look into it, the source doesn't back up the claim. Some false stories aren't completely fake, but rather distortions of real events. These mendacious claims can take a legitimate news story and twist what it says, or even claim that something that happened long ago is related to current events. One deceptive website took a story that was over a year old from CNN and slapped on a new, misleading headline and publication date. So on top of the deception, there was copyright infringement. Remember, there is such a thing as satire. Normally it's clearly labeled as such, and sometimes it's even funny. But it isn't the news. And then there's the more debatable forms of satire, designed to pull one over on the reader. These posts are also designed to encourage clicks and generate money for the creator through ad revenue. But they aren't news. We know this is difficult. Confirmation bias leads people to put more stock in information that confirms their beliefs and discount information that doesn't. But the next time you're automatically appalled at some social media post concerning, say, a politician you oppose, take a moment to check it out. Try this simple test. What other stories have been posted to the news website that is the source of the story that just popped up in your social media feed? You may be predisposed to believe a story about a politician you don't like, but if the alleged news site also features a story about Guardians from Antarctica retaliating against America by hitting New Zealand with an earthquake, maybe you should think twice before sharing. And yes, that earthquake story is a real example of a fake story that popped up. We know you're busy, and some of this debunking takes time, but fact checkers get paid to do this kind of work. Between factcheck.org, Snopes.com, the Washington Post Fact Checker, and PolitiFact.com, it's likely at least one has already fact-checked the latest viral claim to pop up in your social media newsfeed. And remember, newsreaders themselves remain the first line of defense against fake news. To see more, go to factcheck.org.
All right, so they went over them kind of quick, so I want to break down the 8 different strategies to spot fake news that were brought up in that video. So the first one is consider the source, right? This is really helpful if you're looking at online sources to take a look at the actual web address. Is it a .edu or a .gov site? These are official government or educational sites and are typically the most reliable. It might be a .com or a .net site. These are more commercial sources. That doesn't mean they're not reliable or not accurate, but they're maybe less so than the .edu or the .gov. And then there's some cheaper web hosting platforms that might end your web address in like .com, .co, or .news. And these are often indicators of fake news sites, inaccurate information, definitely something to keep your eye out. We gotta check the author. Ask yourself, is this a real person, right? Sometimes we might see a play on words in the name in some fake news sites. Also ask yourself, can you find other reliable things written by this person? If you were to Google their name, does it come up with a list of reliable articles, or maybe there's some controversy about them and their authorship? You also then want to read beyond the headlines, right? So headlines and all these sources of news are meant to draw your attention. They're meant to be eye-catching. They're meant to give you a really quick snapshot of what the article is all about and draw you in to read more. That being said, a lot of headlines can be really misleading and not present the actual truthful story in a realistic light. You want to pay attention in headlines too for the use of like all caps or exclamation points, just because they are indicators of not the most reliable writing. And then finding supporting sources. Is only one news source or website or article posting this information, or are multiple outlets reporting the same facts? The more people that support it, the more likely it is to be true. And then we have checking the date. So is the story or the information being presented relevant today? Are they using outdated sources or statistics in order to claim, make new claims or to justify something happening today? Then checking your own bias. So this one is really, really difficult to do, much easier said than done. But it requires you to kind of look into yourself and think about how might your own beliefs, interests, values, morals, how all of those might be impacting your interpretation of what is being presented. Right? This also goes along the lines of fake news is not something you just don't like or don't agree with. And there's just checking if it's a joke. This is where our satire comes in, right? Is it from a satirical site or a satirical publisher? Some of these include, like the most popular ones, The Onion or The National Report. A really good way to figure this out is just type in "is X satire," right, with the name of the publication or the name of the author, and it'll often come up with like a yes or no answer. And then finally, when in doubt, ask an expert. This could look like a teacher or a librarian, maybe a doctor or a nurse, or even some other trusted adults, but someone that knows more about the subject at hand. So let's practice this a little bit. We have 2 news articles here, both that I found at points in times on my own Facebook feed, right? With the same sort of story or topic line, but presented in 2 different ways. So if we look first here at the site, on the left, we see this is from cornell.edu. And then on the right, we see this is from sciencetruth.com.co. So right off the bat, it's more likely that we can trust the .edu site over the .com.co site. Similarly, the one on the right, Science Truth. My rule of thumb is if it has to directly tell you that it's the truth, it's probably not, right? Words like truth or fact or real deal, like all of that should raise your red flags because the truth doesn't need to tell you it's the truth. Then here, let's look at the title. We have Sickeningly Sweet on the left and Warning, Donuts are the leading cause of cancer in young children. Both function as attention grabbers, right? They make you want to read more. So they're both functioning that way as effective titles. And the one on the right is using all caps, exclamation point, and the language they use is kind of a scare tactic, right? Pairing that with an image of an innocent looking sprinkled donut, and you start kind of feeling like, oh my gosh, this is like a real scary thing. Maybe I should share it. I should let everyone know about this scary donut thing that's happening. And then you have to look at the source. On the left, we see that they're specifically citing Dr. Cantley at this well-renowned medical site. On the right, we have the vague word of scientist. If you were to Google Dr. Cantley, you would come up with their entire research project, right? You could follow that trail and realize that this is legitimate. On the right, not so much. Who are we going to look into? What scientists are doing this? So ultimately, this gives you a good idea of one on the left, accurate, factual information, one on the right, not so much. Let's talk a little bit now about media and body image. Right, so there are images of what the media believes to be the ideal look for men, the ideal look for women, and these images are everywhere. TV, movies, music videos, online platforms, social media, Instagram, magazines, billboard ads, video games, like you name it, these body ideals are out there. But they're just ideals. They're not realistic images, right? Especially when you take into consideration things like Photoshop and airbrushing and all the editing that we can do and just sort of the magic behind the scenes with that technology. When you are constantly being bombarded with these images, it's hard to not compare yourself to them, right? We ask, like, if these images are so bad, why are they being shown to us, right? And they really are bad. When you look to the research on this, right, comparing yourself to these unrealistic body ideals can lead to things like anxiety, depression, eating disorders, body dysmorphia, low self-esteem, some really serious conditions. Why do you think they would do it then? The answer is, it's all about the money. Right? The worse you feel about yourself, the more likely you are to go and look for this magical cure-all solution, right? Something that'll fix all these problems that aren't really problems. And there are companies out there that say, okay, well, we have these magic solutions, but you have to give us the money. And these solutions could be things like weight loss products, diet supplements, makeup, hair care products, hair removal products, anything to get you closer to that ideal. When these products don't work, duh, they're not going to work. They're not going to fix a problem that's not really a problem and give you a solution that's not a solution anyone can fix aside from using Photoshop. You're going to feel even worse about yourself. And sort of the whole cycle begins again. So you feel even worse, so you look for another cure, another solution, shell out more money. And it's just this vicious, vicious cycle. So let's take another couple minutes and take a look at this video that shows you some of the impact that being bombarded with these images in our culture can have on both boys and girls' body image and feelings and emotions.
I want to be skinny.
All the girls look for physique in a man. Pecs and abs, as long as the guy looks good, they'll go for him.
I don't like my leg. Every time I wear a skirt, I always keep tugging it down because I think my thighs are fat.
Either you're too tall, you're too short, you're skinny, you're too fat.
And so they starve themselves and they work out like crazy.
I feel pressure like that a lot, and then I try to go home and do sit-ups. Your workouts are smaller, lighter, tighter. They're thinking all the time in your head, I'm fat, I'm fat, I'm fat.
I always wanted to stay good and mortifying it.
I was thinner and stuff, and people just started talking to me like I had friends. Like, you have to be hospitalized.
It's just constantly on everyone's mind. Like I can get stronger and bigger. I feel like I still need to get bigger.
Close up already, and players like basketball players, football players, you see them, you look at their arms and their bodies, it's like you see nothing but muscle. Everyone's worried about what other people think.
My body could never be that unless I went to unhealthy means to get that, and it's not worth it.
Probably lost like 10 pounds of body weight, and like everybody's like, your shirts used to be tighter, what happened? I think most of it's from like media, like magazines.
So this is how you feel about yourself.
You're not seeing it thinking, oh, that's airbrush, oh, that's thick. You're not thinking about that. You're thinking about, like, why don't I look that way?
And it's not fair. Your workouts are smaller, lighter, tighter.
And women are looking at bodies like that going, my son doesn't look like that, I'm supposed to look like that?
It really works. It really works. Becomes an obsession.
Realize that other things are more important than that.
About our body image like 24/7 is not really good for anybody because it makes us lose focus on other things that we have going on in life.
You know, if you're healthy, it's got nothing to do with how much you weigh. I always say that there is a better looking girl or guy always in the room. So if you continue to compare yourself to other people, you'll never be happy. I'm gonna rock me and I'm gonna love me. Some days I'm like, ooh, not so cute. But it's something that you constantly have to tell yourself.
Show me a smile, babe. Don't be
It's hard because I do know what it's like. I can't give them my teenage answer, but I can't give them my mom answer either because they won't get it yet. You know? I don't even get it yet.
You call me up because you know I'll be there, and I see your true colors shining through. I see your true colors.
Great. So as you guys can see, that can really play a serious role in your thoughts, and when these thoughts become sort of all-consuming, it can really take over your life. So let's transition a little bit and play a game, right? See if you can use what you learned in this presentation to pick out the fake news, right? So here's one article. I'll give you guys a second to look at it and decide if you think this is fake or fact. Right, let's see if you are right. The story is fake. All right, so how can we tell? Let's look at some of the clues. Okay. First, we've got the .com.co site. Again, not as reliable of a web hosting. You can take a look at the title here, CBS News. That seems like a news source, right? I know that's a TV channel. This is an example of a website that's a mock-up, so it's made to look like the CBS News site, but in reality it's not. You can tell because the CBS News logo is missing, right? So they avoid copyright infringement by not including the logo, just sort of the name. If you're not being really careful, you could miss that. Also taking a look at the headline here. This is an example of a headline that is meant to draw up some really extreme emotions, right? And the more sensationalized, the more extreme those emotions, the more likely people are to A, believe it, and B, share it without critically thinking and taking that next step. So this is something that you would often see shared without people ever kind of digging deeper and figuring out if it's actually true. It's hard to see here, but the author of this article is Jimmy Rusling, right? So that's a play on words. Definitely something that would give you a clue that this is not real. What about this one? Give you guys a couple seconds to take a look at it. The verdict is fake. So what clues do we have here? Again, this comes from a .news site. .news sites, cheaper web hosting. Cheaper web hosting means more likely that it is not a reliable source. Then take a look at the headline here. We have a good example of them using all caps in the word urgent and a typo. Valid news sources, while certainly mistakes happen and typos happen, they have copy editors. They have numerous people that are looking at things and making sure that these mistakes aren't happening, especially in the headline. So any sort of grammar mistake, spelling mistake, especially in a headline, good indicator this is not a reliable source. Taking a look at the name here, again, this was written by Liberty Bell. Play on words. Not a real author. You see this big like and share button. Certainly in our society of Social media likes and shares are important, especially to get news and information out there. However, reliable news sources are never going to slap this huge like and share sticker on their news. They're just not. You may see the things like at the bottom, the small little like Facebook, Twitter shares. That's pretty commonplace. But a big like and share sticker right on the front page, it's not really protocol. And finally, if you were to do a reverse image search, you would find that the image they use here on the left is a stock photo image. It has nothing to do with this article. It's not related. They just kind of had it, found it on the internet, slapped it to their report. It's not what reliable news sources would do. All right, what about this one? Give you guys a couple of seconds. All right, this one here is fact. All right, so what clues do we have that this is a fact? Right, so we got a .com site, not as reliable as the .edu or the .gov, but definitely not raising the red flags like a .com, .co, or a .news site would. We have here that it is written by Rob Quinn. There's a picture of him. If you were to click on this, which is an active link, it takes you to a page of all of the articles that Rob Quinn has written. You can go through and Google his name. Nothing kind of weird or sketchy comes up. Seems like it's an actual author. Not a play on words, is a real person. And you can look here is they give a source for the photo. So unlike the last example that just had a random stock photo, this is saying, hey, we got this picture specifically from this place and it's relevant to what we're talking about. Reliable news sources will always give credit when they use someone else's picture. And you can take a look is that they are writing this article about something that the CDC has said. So the CDC is a legitimate organization. It's a real thing. So articles that you see quoting reliable sources or writing about reliable organizations, it's a good sign that it's true. And then both of these here, the study and the CNN, are links. So if you were to click and follow the link of the study, it will pull up the actual study that the CDC is basing this warning on. And if you were to pull up the CNN link, it pulls up the original news source that this particular site is reporting on. So Newser, it as a whole, is a site that often writes their own articles about articles that have already been written. So while this isn't a perfect site, it is fact. What would be better is if you followed the CNN link and actually read the original report of this, if that makes sense. So even though the title is super sensationalized, if you were to follow the strategy of reading the rest of the article and following through, reading beyond the headline, we can learn now that this is actually fact. All right, what about this one? Give you guys a couple of seconds to look at it. This one is fake, okay? How do we know? One, the source is Facebook. That should instantly give anyone pause, right? Where did this come from? Who is this person? We don't know. We don't know these answers because this post was shared thousands of times. So we don't know where it originated from, which means we don't know the author. We don't have a reliable source. Definite red flags right there. Another thing is, this seems like it's medical advice, and I don't know about you, but I'm not a medical provider. I'm not a doctor, I'm not a nurse. maybe you don't know. This is a perfect time to ask an expert, right? If you were to ask an expert, they would tell you that antibiotic, either creams or pills, they protect against bacterial infections, right? Things caused by a bacteria. The flu, as it mentions here, we used to do this during the flu season, is a virus. So something that protects against bacteria is not going to do anything for viruses. I don't expect everyone to know that, right? That's not necessarily common knowledge. That's why asking an expert would be a really good example here. Right. What about this one? Give you guys a couple of seconds. All right, this one is also fact. All right, how do we know? How can we tell? Because this sounds like a crazy story, trust me. And it is a crazy mascot. We can tell because this comes from Sports Illustrated. So again, while this is a .com site, Sports Illustrated is absolutely a reliable source for sports-related news. We take a look at the author, Jenna West, same thing. You were to Google this name, you can come up with a wide variety of sports-related reporting, none of which has any controversy behind them. Good indicator this is a real author writing real news. We can take a look here. They give photo credit for where the image comes from. Good best practice right there. And the underlined red here, if you were reading this online, are links to corroborating stories. So it talks, the first one is a link to the police announcement, and then the second link is to their original story, because this is a follow-up to that original story. It's really hard to make something up if there's all of these other sources, again, backing it up. This is a good chance of, you know, checking your sources and seeing if other sources are saying the same thing. All right, we got one more. Was Photoshop used in this picture? What do you guys think? And if you think yes, where was it used? So give me a second. The answer is yes, and the answer is it was used pretty much everywhere, right? The car is not the same. The setting is not the same. Okay. There's also a lot of photoshopping done to the people themselves. So you can see that the guy is made tanner. His jawline is made sharper. You can see with the girl here, her arm was made thinner, or her thigh was made thinner, her bottom was made rounder, right? These are all sort of edits that go back to this unrealistic body image, right? So the thing you saw on the left, the image there, could easily have been something that came up on your social media feed, right? And you might have just scrolled past it, not really thinking about it. But when we're constantly viewing these things, these ideals get ingrained in our head. And then when we view ourselves in the mirror, it's that constant source of comparison. So this is an example of something that seems pretty benign, right? So what? They Photoshop their picture, big deal. People do it all the time. But it becomes that big deal when people are doing it all the time, because then even though we know it's not real, it's really hard to convince our brains that that's the case. All right. So that's all I have for you guys. I hope that you learned something and took something away from this presentation. If you liked it and want to learn more, certainly reach out to myself or Ellen, and we'd love to talk to you more about it. Great. See you guys.
All right, guys, so that's all we got for you today. We hope you got something out of it. You learned something new that maybe you didn't know before, and you're able to share that information with your family or your friends. Share the video with them, and hopefully they can learn a little bit more about the things that they post on social media. Have a great day.